then we will switch to English. Questo lavoro che Beatrice Gibson ha realizzato grazie all'Italian Council, che appunto con questo progetto è stato promosso, appunto c'è Laura Barreca qua dal Museo Civico di Castelbuono, e è come sempre nell'Italian Council sono quelle operazioni collettive, e un po' come anche il modo in cui Beatrice lavora in questa dimensione collaborativa, come anche questa stessa opera, e che appunto è stata presentata in Inghilterra e a Milano in una mostra che si chiuderà domenica, sabato o lunedì, vabbè, aperta fino a questo weekend, e appunto lì è anche, come dire, un'opera di immagine in movimento che si presta, ecco, a essere anche ripensata in modo diverso, e forse magari questo sarà anche uno dei punti che toccherete. E con Beatrice poi tra l'altro ci sono molti interessi in comune, e ad esempio ha fatto un bellissimo video suo insieme a C.A. Conrad, che era qua quando abbiamo fatto la mostra con Jason Dodge, e quindi ci sono tanti punti di contatto, e appunto oggi Beatrice parlerà con Francesco Urbano Ragazzi, e quindi non tolgo parola a loro, e non so se Laura te vuoi dire due parole.
Tipo, grazie per esempio per l'ospitalità, per per essere partner culturale, il macro di questo progetto itinerante che appunto è stato presentato al British Art Show 9 in autunno, e adesso è a Milano, e poi qui, e poi a Castelbuono in provincia di Palermo il 23 di aprile, quindi per chi poi vorrà continuare questa saga può venire insieme a Castelbuono. Volevo soltanto aggiungere che appunto questo progetto nasce veramente da una esperienza autobiografica che Beatrice Gibson, che è diventata cittadina italiana insieme a Nick Gordon e a Obi e Laser, che sono i due bambini, sono diventati i nostri concittadini a Palermo, e quindi questo progetto è nato proprio perché un artista trova in Italia una casa effettivamente, e soprattutto dopo appunto l'epoca post-Brexit che ha devastato in qualche modo anche l'opinione pubblica inglese, e portando alcuni appunto artisti che sono forse più sensibili a prendere delle scelte anche diverse. E quindi questo viaggio è stato e poi diventato un pensiero forse anche sempre così più insistente. Infine è diventata un'opera che noi stasera qui diciamo discuteremo insieme a Francesco Urbano Ragazzi, a cui va il mio ringraziamento per essere qui con noi, e ringrazio voi di essere qui e di ascoltarci. Grazie.
Buonasera a tutti. You in the middle? In the middle. Yes. You can also make a wish because you are in between two people with the same name. So. Sì, ovviamente siamo noi a ringraziare Luca Lopinto e Laura Barreca e soprattutto Beatrice Gibson per questo invito. Of course I'll switch to English then. Don't worry.
That is really in my face. Is it possible? In my face. Maybe I'll just. Alright, that is much better.
Yeah. E devo dire appunto che è bello trovarsi tra amici, e questa parola ha un significato molto particolare a partire dal lavoro di Beatrice. Ci siamo conosciuti attraverso una comune amica, Pauline Desjardins, e questo già la dice lunga su come il cinema di Beatrice sia generativo di relazioni e una macchina in qualche modo di relazioni d'affetto. Then we can switch.
Mine is on. Mine?
No. Yeah. It's working now? Yeah? Okay. Okay, good evening. I don't know if you need me to translate at some point. So
Sì, forse non lo so.
But I mean, first introduction. I mean, as Laura was already mentioning, you moved to Palermo very recently, and I mean, what we saw, what we watched before, is about relocation at many levels. In the sense that it's cinema relocated, as Francesco Casetti would say. In the sense that, of course, it's a cinema that is conceived in a media. It's sort of, let's say, environmental dimension of cinema. So you try to evoke an architectural dimension, a spatial dimension, a mental dimension through cinema. So there is this kind of relocation. So even here, thank you, Hodil Deck, for this environment. You created another kind of mood, another kind of environment, and it develops a certain state of mind. So it's a metaphysical dimension, physical and metaphysical dimension through moving images. But again, images are moving, so there is like a sort of erratic dimension of cinema, and also let's say existential erratic dimension of cinema. So it's your own relocation into another place. So the relocation some way is like at the center of the film. So we want to know how it happened that you came to Palermo, and how this journey was conceived, and how are you in Palermo now?
Vabbè.
Do you need me to just to...
Chi parlo... tutti parlano inglese, va bene? Sì, io parlo in inglese perché il mio italiano non è abbastanza bene, penso. Quindi, if you need a translation, you should put your hand and noi lo faremo. Va bene. In Italian you need a translation. Sì.
Allora, veloce, la domanda era semplicemente il cinema, diciamo, come ci diceva prima Laura Varreca, Beatrice recentemente si è trasferita in Italia, cioè proprio in questi ultimi anni, diciamo, pandemici, eccetera. E quindi, diciamo, il tema del trasloco, in qualche maniera, è un tema molto presente nel film, ma anche in generale nel lavoro di Beatrice, e quindi volevamo capire come questa dimensione erratica, questa dimensione che ha a che fare non solo con diciamo, la sua storia personale, ma in generale con l'idea di quella che abbiamo chiamato la relocation del cinema, cioè il cinema relocato è proprio il cinema che produce spazi e che è inteso in una dimensione ambientale, quindi che produce ambienti. E per farvi un piccolo esempio, la mostra che adesso è in corso ad Ordet è pensata con questa rete che produce una serie di riflessi nello spazio, e con i suoni che adesso avete anche potuto ascoltare, produce tutta una dimensione onirica che è diversa da quella che per esempio qui con questo spazio di deck viene generato. Per cui ecco, c'è questa dimensione ambientale che è un ambiente della mente, in qualche maniera un'estensione della mente, che è insomma, una cifra stilistica e metafisica del lavoro di Beatrice. Quindi entriamo.
I want to say also that because we are speaking, maybe we will speak about other works too, but right now we're speaking specifically about this work, and my partner Nick is in the audience, and he decided to come very last minute, and he is really the co-director of this piece, and it's important, as you say, because my work is like often extremely collective and relational, and this is a very important relationship. So I will invite him to help me when I am describing things, or to add whatever you want. So the story behind the work is very sort of domestic really and banal, but maybe that's interesting in and of itself, kind of like a minor story. So it was in the middle of the pandemic. Actually, it was in the beginning, in the first lockdown, and we have 2 children, small children, and we suddenly had to become the professori of these kids, which was like a daunting task. And I remember the first day my son came down the stairs fully dressed in his uniform, interpolated the authority somehow. But also, so we had this experience of me I downloaded the curriculum, I tried to teach him for a week. My daughter was a little bit too small. Poi alla fine della settimana, it was like a horrible nightmare or hell, as I'm sure many of you understand, or those who have children understand. And so I said to Nick, like, I cannot take this anymore. I'm just going to ask them what the hell they want to do, and we'll do that, and maybe we can do something that we want to do. So I said to my son, what would you like to do? Because I cannot be your teacher. And he said, I want to do Greek mythology. So I was like, really? Fabulous. I want to do experimental cinema. So let's try to find like a path in the middle. Vuoi fare un traduzione?
Diciamo che appunto per farla brevissima.
Wow. Ok.
Faccio io finché sistemano. Appunto il film che voi avete visto parte da una da una situazione abbastanza banale in se stessa, domestica. Eravamo all'inizio appunto del primo lockdown, quando eravate ancora in Inghilterra, e all'improvviso appunto lei e il suo partner appunto, che è anche co-regista, co-direttore del film, si sono trovati in quella strana situazione in cui altri si sono trovati a essere all'improvviso non solo i genitori dei propri figli ma anche i loro professori. Per cui lei appunto ha cercato, assieme insomma la coppia ha cercato di insegnare qualcosa, di proseguire insomma la scuola dei propri figli a casa. Quindi lei ha chiesto appunto al figlio che cosa volesse studiare, e lui ha risposto mitologia greca, voglio sapere qualcosa della mitologia greca, e lei ha risposto perfetto, io voglio fare cinema sperimentale, e da lì è partito tutto.
No, mine. E poi at a certain point also he followed that by saying, well, so Mama, you should make a Greek tragedy. And I thought, God, maybe I should make a Greek tragedy. But it seemed like, yeah, sort of uncanny, in the sense that Greek tragedy is often defined, I'm sure you know this, because in Italy it's very much part of your curriculum in a way that it isn't in the UK school. But yeah, it's defined by a kind of extreme circumstances that befall the protagonist, like war or plague, for example. And so we decided a bit to run with this like fanciful idea of making a Greek tragedy. And I've been interested for a long time in female characters who make epic journeys in one way or another. And I'm very influenced by a poet called Alice Notley, who wrote she's an American poet who lives in Paris. She was a member of the New York School, and she wrote a lot about motherhood and maternity, and she's a strongly feminist poet at a time when not many people were. And she wrote this poem called The Descent of Alette, which is about this woman who goes on an epic journey, a descent into the underworld. And so I can't remember how it came to be, but I had a copy of Alcestis, I think I had an Anne Carson translation of Alcesti by my bedside, and there was this amazing and similar story, Alcesti, in it. And Alcestis is the first female mortal to undertake an epic journey. Before that, the Greeks are like the beginning of patriarchy, I guess, and so that was really like mostly the domain of male characters or of the gods. And she's the first one to take this sort of epic trajectory. But then it's also very fascinating because she doesn't really do much in the play. She's like completely silent. She agrees to die for her husband and sort of cries and laughs a bit and then goes off into the underworld, comes back and says absolutely nothing. So she's this completely mysterious figure, but that's a lot to translate.
Sì, appunto, e durante questo corso appunto sulla mitologia greca, mio figlio mi suggerisce, mamma, dovresti fare una tragedia. E appunto io sono rimasta sorpresa da questa affermazione, mi è sembrata interessante anche perché nel curriculum appunto inglese, nel piano di studi inglese, come dire, appunto, lo studio della tragedia greca non ha il peso che ha qui in Italia. E quindi ho iniziato a riflettere su questa idea e forse per caso avevo una traduzione dell'Alcesti appunto, per cui ho iniziato a lavorare su questo testo e l'ho immediatamente connesso al lavoro di una poetessa che mi ha molto ispirato anche in passato, che è Alice Nettle.
Not me.
Ok. Che appunto è vissuta a Parigi, ha fatto parte della New York School e che in qualche modo ha molto parlato di maternità e ha anche descritto in una delle sue poesie un viaggio nell'aldilà, un viaggio nell'Ade. Ho connesso appunto il lavoro di questa poetessa ad Alcesti perché Alcesti appunto è la prima donna che in qualche modo compie un viaggio nell'aldilà, nella mitologia greca, perché appunto l'aldilà, insomma, l'Ade di solito è inteso come un terreno maschile, per cui sono gli uomini che visitano l'Ade, e invece appunto nel caso di Alcesti questa volta era una donna, ma la particolarità è che la tragedia quasi non parla di questo viaggio. Alcesti nel mito torna muta, quindi è una figura che in qualche modo tiene il segreto di questo viaggio e da qui è partito appunto il mio interesse.
And then I have a million things to say, but I'll try to return to your question. So, yeah, and then we had this I sort of fantasy always of moving to Italy, but we never was always kind of really a fantasy. And then we decided in the middle of the pandemic also, let's just go, and this story of Alcestis will kind of follow us, and we'll try to make a film on the way. And it was kind of like, you know, with the Bolex, it was like very casual and light-hearted. And then we arrived in Palermo, and we had to sort of stop a bit because we realized like that now we are in a place, we cannot simply quickly make a film. We have really to like immerse ourselves more in the place in a more serious way, because also we really felt that it had legs. We wanted to make something, became a little bit more serious in our mind. It took on like an epic dimension, and so we stopped to sort of filming, and we met a very fascinating and interesting woman, many of you may know, called Maria Nadotti, through our producer, who suggested that we should work together with her. And she's a translator and a critic and a very incredible human. And she has this way of throwing bombs inside your thinking. So she kind of exploded everything that we put in front of her and made us rethink the whole project to reflect something more collective. So it departed a bit from this idea of like an autobiographical journey that relates to an epic journey, and it became something much more collective, so that the structure of the film or of the installation that you just saw is really is about multiple people having the same dream, about collectively dreaming the same dream. In this instance, there is a man and a woman, but there is also Alcesti herself, who is potentially dreaming us, and it's not really clear. Like, who is being dreamt by whom. And the way that we have produced this structure or come up with this structure is really through Maria's input, because we set up a reading group on Zoom in Palermo to reflect on Alcesti from a very emotional point of view. Like, how do people relate to her emotionally? Because what is fascinating about her is, again, this like silence. So she's in a way infinitely relatable to everybody, because you can put whatever you want into her tabula rasa, if you like. And also she takes a journey which we all take in our lives, either physically, geographically, or internally. So she's like this open, holographic. I always thought of her as holographic in that way, like can make her reflect what you want. And so she's like this therapeutic, fascinating ancestral trope. And so that Zoom was really revelatory, and then based on the structure of that, which was very collective and also anonymous, people didn't know it was in relation to a film production. It was just a kind of random reflection on Alcesti as a character in relation to their own lives. So we decided to like take the film a bit away from the individual and more into this collective space. Sorry, that's also a lot.
E in effetti lei, diciamo, cercando di condensare, l'idea è che appunto questa sovrapposizione tra il viaggio personale e questo viaggio mitologico in qualche maniera si sono andati a sovrapporre, però è diventato di più, nel senso che poi quando loro sono arrivati, la loro famiglia è arrivata a Palermo, ci sono posti il punto che fare un film diventava un po' più complesso, cioè bisognava, come dire, introdursi all'interno di un contesto cittadino, ragionare su delle relazioni, ed è così che sono entrati in contatto con una traduttrice, una persona straordinaria, che è questa Maria Nadotti, che è stata, come dire, una figura centrale, perché ha come caricato con una sua cultura letteraria quello che, come dire, era il loro background, e ha portato, come dire, nuovi spunti alla produzione di questo film, che poi si è andato allargando, diventando come una tavola rotonda su una tavola rasa, nel senso che ci sono stati una serie di Zoom meeting con persone che, come dire, una riflessione collettiva attorno al mito di Alcesti, che in effetti è un mito abbastanza misterioso, è una figura abbastanza misteriosa quella di Alcesti, proprio perché è silente, quindi diciamo come dire, è una figura su cui si può proiettare molto, e quindi diciamo le proiezioni, i sogni che, come dire, il film stesso poi dopo un po' produce a sua volta, sono un po' il frutto di questa proiezione legata a questi incontri in cui si ragionava su questa figura, e quindi in qualche maniera il processo filmico è diventato un processo di scrittura collettiva insieme a questi gruppi online.
Yeah, so I think Luca told me it's okay to continue in English, so ask Luca for a translation. So let's start to unpack a little bit your relationship with not only with Alcestis but with Greek myth, because somehow in a sense Alcestis is also very far from a feminist prototype, because in a sense she is willing to sacrifice her own life for her husband. For the one of you that don't know the myth, the god Apollos grants Admetus, a Greek king, the gift of immortality, but he wants the life of someone else in exchange. Admetus asks his parents to die for him, his servants to die for him, and nobody wants to sacrifice their own lives for the king. So Alcestis decides to sacrifice her own life, in a sense. So it's Alberto Savinio, for instance, describes Alcestis as a patriarchal dream. So your wife that is willing to make everything for you, that disappears for your will, for your will to eternity. So how did you approach this background?
I honestly don't really care about that interpretation at all, I have to say. I think like the idea of her as sacrificial is very, very uninteresting to me. I really used her for my own ends. You know, I'm interested in like in really specific things that she touches on, and also, yeah, like for example, the fact that she goes down into the underworld and not up towards the Enlightenment and sort of rational thinking and logic, which was more the terrain of more of a patriarchal construction of the world. The fact that she like goes down into the underworld, into the unconscious, let's say, and into dreaming as like somewhere that might have some answers is why I'm kind of fascinated by her. I don't really care so much about traditional interpretations of Alcesti or sacrifice or things like that. I'm interested more in the idea of like down versus up. You know? Yeah, Nick, come, help.
Come, please. Can we have another chair? Maybe?
It was just in our conversations with Maria Nadotti, who was amazing about Alcestis. I think that the idea of summoning her as the central figure when she's been sidelined in the Greek tragedy was, I think the way that we began to think about her was that her decision to leave the patriarchy, to leave her husband, and to leave that world behind is like, I don't give a fuck. Why would I want to stay here? I'm in prison. I'm going to the Val di La, to this other world, because there's freedom there. And to you it may seem death, but it's more death staying here. So like seeing her as a woman or as a person who's a symbol of liberation and of a knowledge that we can only ever know after we have died, makes her into like a Laura Palmer, mysterious, incredible figure who we can look to learn about our fears, and which I think makes her much more of a powerful, interesting character. So through Maria, we began to think about her in that way.
Stay with us. Yeah, exactly.
That's a fantastic answer. Also because you, of course, you can project everything in Alcestis' silence, but you, in the film, you also connote this silence, and you say that it's not a cry, but it's a laugh. And I found it very powerful, also because in the history of feminism is made of a lot of laughing, in a sense. I immediately thought, just to say, in the area of Greek thinking about the servant who laughs at Thalys, who is looking at the stars, and because he's looking at the stars, he falls down in a cliff. So, in a sense, laughing is a feminist stance also. So I want to know a little bit more why you thought about this silence as laughing.
It was the idea that she's having the last laugh, really. No, I mean, I don't know, I have a complicated relationship with laughing and humor, because people always say I'm very funny, but my films are very serious, and they don't understand why I didn't make a funny film. So it's something I have to explore a bit more about humor, and especially humor is like a feminist trope. Yeah, I don't know, Nick, do you have anything to add to the...
Not really. I think there's the no. I was just going to say that my favourite moment in the film is when B says, which just happens because we were trying to summon the world of dreams and create these dreams, and she was joking around and she says, "I miss capitalism," and I just like that is a typical B comment, which is said in jest. But there's something that just in relation to Palermo and the decision to move there and what Alcestis might represent, that I just couldn't stop laughing when she said it. So
This is the first Q&A I've ever done with my partner, and it's
It's terrible.
it's my idea of hell. Joke.
And Alcestis is also a meditation on death, of course, and at a certain point you also whisper, teach me to die. So why do you need to know more about death? Is it a personal claim? Is it something more that has to do with a political situation? Why?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely to do with the political situation and a feeling of like living in very chaotic political, social, economic, biological, climatic moment. And yeah, I think another real motivation for her as a character is like trying to, because it's like teach me how to die is also teach me how to live, like teach me how to be in these like extremely turbulent moments. That's kind of the sentiment behind the sentence, or behind the request. And then, yeah, we spent a lot of time thinking about trying to rethink, like, death, basically. Like, you know, in the sense, if the world is dying, what does it mean? Like, what kind of relationship can we have to the end? And maybe the end isn't the end. Maybe, like, it's more like... I don't want to sound sort of too psychoanalytical, but like, yeah, like trying to use the trope of understanding life through death in order to understand how to behave and be ethically in the world today in this very current political moment, which in some ways is apocalyptic, which means a death and then potentially a rebirth into some other reality. I don't know, I don't have an answers to the question because the film is really a question about that. And we're already living in this moment, and I don't know what the hell the answer is. Like, how are we supposed to survive, like, climate breakdown? How are we supposed to survive, like, widening gaps between the rich and the poor? How are we supposed to survive, like, 43 wars raging in the planet? Like, I literally cannot sit on a Q&A. And so it's more like a kind of grappling with that question. So I cannot answer it. Maybe you can.
No answer. Okay.
No, I wanted to know. I mean, we were talking about dying and laughing, and but I mean, we can't not talk about sleeping and dreaming, of course. So I mean, the main scene, it's I mean, it's quite kind of iconic in the sense that you are sleeping, so the artist is sleeping, the author is sleeping, and it's like it takes, I don't know, the most part of the film, let's say, and also even if of course you are sleeping, but many things are happening through sounds, to superpositions of images and so on. So of course we cannot think about I don't know, Andy Warhol. We cannot think about surrealism, of course. So all this idea about sleeping collectively and creating this act of passivity that can be very active. This is, of course, something that is part of also the history of art. But we wanted to know more about that scene. How did you film it? And also, I mean, yeah, your own feeling about sleeping.
So that scene is, amazingly, I'm actually asleep. I don't know how it happened because normally I'm really wired when I'm shooting, but I think, I don't know, a couple of feet or so, I don't know, I managed to fall asleep. So, like, literally sleeping. And in practical terms, Nick filmed it. We had, Nick is the DOP of the film. And we had minimal people in the room at the time. It's quite intimate, wasn't it? There was Jenny, the line producer maybe, and sound. So very, very reduced crew. Maybe that's why it was so relaxing. And then, yeah, more theoretically or something. Again, like dreaming. I'm like fascinated by the idea of like the emotional, let's say, all these things that haven't really been part of public life historically from the time of the Greeks. These as like also as like a possible terrain for knowledge production or for some different kind of knowledge. Like so the things that are traditionally, I guess, associated with the feminine quality or energy, like sleeping or dreaming. There's a really beautiful essay by Alice Notley that she wrote about dreaming, which we will republish in the publication that we'll make around the project. And I don't remember the exact formulation, but she says something really beautiful about like looking internally and towards dreaming as a way to understand or for a theory of origins. Like traditionally, we've looked sort of at there's like a scientific or philosophical explanations of like the theory of origins, or why we are alive, why we're here. But why did nobody ever look like internally inside our own selves, inside our own unconsciousness, and inside our own dreams? There must be like a kind of a repository of knowledge also there. And then she also makes a beautiful statement or idea around like the fact that like dreaming is really world making, in like an uncanny way. Like dreaming is way better than movies. Like you have like crazy shit happens in dreams, and also it has like this totally disassociative emotional aspect. So like you can kill your mother in a dream but be laughing or feel nothing, or like it's like completely and so it has this like potency in terms of its ability to world make. So I'm interested in like the formal logic of dreams also, as well as the emotional, the intellectual power of the emotional, or something like that.
Can I just add, not anything about the theoretical part, but we come from very different worlds. I've been involved in commercial film, and so the tension between us on set was like Bee's mode of production, the way she makes her films, is completely alien to me, and it's communal production. It's very tiny crews and really short shoot days. So I think part of the reason why she's able to, and everyone is treated the same, whether you're at the top of the ladder or at the bottom. That traditional hierarchy just doesn't exist. So it's really beautiful to be on her set. It's like I haven't ever been on a set like that, and it's like you can't apply that same. You got to go, you got to get this done, which is how the rest of the film world works. So we were shooting in the apartment next door to where we lived, and it was very calm because Bee just refuses to try to do too much. So her whole mode of production reflects her interests as an artist, and I think that's part of the reason why you could fall asleep. On my set, it would have never happened. If it was me on my own, we never would have got that shot that way. It would have felt fake.
Mm-hmm. But was it planned, the scene of you sleeping? I mean, was it already planned? Yeah. So, but
it's scripted,
okay,
but then it happened.
Okay, it happened. And you were there.
And then he fell asleep also.
Oh. Yeah,
you can see his body like shaking. So.
And just a note about sleeping. There are no records of dreams about the dreamer's own death. So apparently it's impossible to dream our own death. So there is also this somehow eternal dimension of in dreaming that somehow is part of this movie, where all the troubles of life, of the world are somehow left aside and enter in the movie quite clearly, but only through sounds, through some traces, in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite, I mean, it's, I guess, not for everyone, this installation, as it's very demanding in the sense, it's not easy in the sense, it's really just people asleep. I think we were both quite interested in in making something that was like extremely present tense, so really like an immersive experience, not so much about, like, whenever you see film representations of people dreaming, they're always really awful, kind of like, so it was more like the experience, the very present tense experience of sleeping and dreaming, and how does that, like, how to manifest that, which is why it really also is basically happening all in the sound. It was never like an idea like, well, let's visualize. I mean, in some ways the dream of Alcestis is visualized, but more or less the logic of the film is like, what is it really like to dream? It's quite boring probably, and quite quiet. Mm-hmm. And so that was like the departure point in the sound. And then I was thinking also about the thing that you introduced the talk with, also about this kind of immersive or holographic experience. Is really like the idea was really to extend that so that this like very dreamy, sleepy, super present tense, immersive feeling infuses the work, because it's really the first installation, I would say proper installation I've ever made. Because normally I make films that are like really from beginning to end and are quite cinematic. I mean, this is also cinematic in a different way, but like they're normally very linear and they have a beginning and an end. And this is the first real departure into something maybe more, what would you call it, like expanded.
When did you decide to make an holographic installation? I mean, what was the click for coming up with this idea?
We talked about Alcestis as holographic, and it really came from that. I mean, I was trying really to think about ways to literally manifest that. And I think I've seen somewhere before a holographic screen used in a artistic context. And so I worked with a very amazing installation designer called Sue McDermott, who does like Steve McQueen's installations, and we together have designed this system, because actually the screen is like, it's not a hologram. It's actually not a hologram. It is a holographic material, but it's not like there's a shark floating in 3D space. We've like misused the screen, so it's back projected. So it's more like the image is really spilling onto the floor and onto the walls. And here in this beautiful auditorium, we had a fortunate version of it on the ceiling, a lot cheaper than the actual installation. So thank you to Luca for that.
Tell us more about the motorcycle and that scene.
Yeah. Nick.
Just trying to remember how we got to...
The lake is where...
Oh yeah, because that, of course, that it's shot in Pergusa, and Pergusa is in the mountains of Sicily, above Madonia, and that lake Pergusa is supposedly where Hades abducted Persephone and took her into the underworld. And they say, and I do believe it's true, that once a year it turns blood red, which is a special algae there, but that's a reference to the menstrual blood of Persephone. So when we read about that, and we were thinking early on about Greek myths and this heroine and this journey to the underworld, and then when we did a bit of research, we've discovered this Pirelli track built in the 50s, which surrounds the lake, so that the town doesn't have access to the lake. It felt like that would be the place that Persephone or Alcestis or somebody might emerge from the underworld. So that's why she's...
A lineage of women.
Yeah. And she's endlessly, in our mind, she was endlessly looping around the track. Does that answer it?
And did it also came through the communal reading of myths, or was it something that came after?
Do you mean the idea of the lake?
Yeah, exactly. I want to be more specific. After the Zoom reading, did you come up with a screenplay or something? What happened? What was the process in?
Do you remember the trajectory, Nick? I don't remember how the letter.
Pagusa first, and then from the zooms with Maria, the Dreaming Alcestis.
Nick had this very strong idea of a female rider endlessly riding in this kind of looping infinite situation around the lake, and then the idea of that being collectively dreamt came from the zooms themselves. Yeah, but the story of the rider, sorry, a little anecdote, is quite funny also because we couldn't find a female stunt rider in Italy at all, and we kept speaking to the stunt company, and they kept saying, well, we can send you a guy, we'll send you a short guy. We're like, no, I don't want a guy. That would be terrible. And I was like, Nick, should we take a guy? I don't know, would it be all right, a short man? And he was like, no, are you crazy? This is a feminist film. We need like an actual woman. So she came. There are only 2 female stunt riders in Europe, and she came from Germany. Yeah. She's amazing. She's great. Yeah.
What's her name?
Her name is Mei Lin. What's her surname?
Yeah, great.
Mei Lin. I don't remember her surname. Mei Lin, but she's fabulous. If you need her, I can give you her number.
Okay. Fantastic. Another relevant topic, I think it's somehow hospitality, and this comes through dreaming. In a sense, there is a sense of being in a safe space anyway, no? But you were also in a new environment, in a new country, trying to adjust to a new situation to you and your family. And also somehow the myth is also about hospitality, because Alcestis is also somehow saved because Heracles is visiting Admetus and he misbehaved. He's a bad guest in a sense.
So annoying, that part. Because Hercules in the Greek tragedy is also like kind of Keanu Reeves or something, you know, like and Euripides would have put him there because it brings an audience, you know. It's like one Hollywood aspect to the production, so that like people come, and it's so annoying, that bit that he retrieves her. Delete.
Yeah. So my question is, how is it to be a guest? Because I think your cinema in general is about hospitality. Cinema is, to you, I think, a place for being hospitable inside.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful question. Yeah, it is definitely about that. I think it's a lot for me. Well, my films are a lot for me about being in a crowd and being both hosting people and also being hosted myself, I guess. You know, in a kind of direct contrast to like the male author genius who sits alone in his room and comes up with it. I just don't have an experience of making work that is like that. I don't relate to that at all as a way of making things. I always make things. One with a literal crew, or with a team of people in my head, a team of like poets or thinkers or philosophers that I'm thinking with, and friends who help me do things. So I really tried to develop. I mean, it was like sort of organic in a way, but then also in retrospect, always like really trying to produce something that like embodies that collective politics, or that, and also like try to use productions a lot to make relationships as well, as an excuse to make a new friend, or like as a way to reach out to somebody that I'm interested in, because most of my films I often am in them in one way or another, but they feature my immediate community, whether it's my partner, very intimate, in a very intimate context, or my immediate community in the sense of other artists and poets and people that I'm interested in being with. And a lot of it is about trying to make my practice accommodate how I want to live my life. And I wish I'd been taught that somehow in art school also, that it makes a difference what you make. Like, you will have to kind of live out this reality. And so, like, for example, after I had my 2 children, I didn't have any more enough sort of space for watching movies or talking to people in a way that I had before. And so an example of that is like I've started cinema clubs, one I have in London, which is very active at the ICA, and I have now one again in Palermo, and it's a way to like carve out space and time within my professional practice, because that's the only way that I can make time for it, to talk about films and to be with friends and to be with those friends to discuss those films and to create a community a bit. But yeah, well, how does it feel to be hosted? Yeah. I don't know, Nick. You can help me answer it. It's very strange to be a stranieri, and also very freeing. But it's existentially very strange to be outside language and culture. Sometimes it's very lonely, but it's also extremely free. I don't feel bound by anybody's rules. I feel, in some ways, like Alcesti, like. Totally, I don't know, at the school gates. It doesn't matter what I do, because I'm anyway totally weird. And that's really a position of freedom. So, I enjoy being in that, hosted by that context, I guess. I don't know, maybe you have something to add.
No, I think it's more interesting in relation to your practice for you to answer that question. But, yeah.
What I was saying about hospitality, and this dialectics, of being a guest but also a host through cinema is true. I think in every part, as you were saying, in every part of your practice, of your process, not only during the realization of a movie, but also after or during exhibitions, as you said. And in the case of Palermo, you also had workshop sessions with Maria Rosa Susai, who is here also. So. Cheers to Maria Rosa. So, do you want to tell us a little bit more about it? Of course, we talked already about Maria Nadotti, so.
Yeah, the public program is really starting now only in earnest, because it's quite related to the Palermo and the Castelbuono context. But in general, the public program in my practice has been like really important also. Like I've tried very much to bring it into the center of the exhibition. So I had, for example, an exhibition in Camden, art center, where the film there's also an Odette was showing, which is very explicitly collective in the sense of featuring my immediate community, and all of the people. One of the main rooms of the exhibition was a hosting organism, or for all the people in the film, and every single one of them had an event that was like developed from the ground up, basically. So it was like almost like a mini festival, and this like sociality is like a key part. The sociality of the production is a key thing, and again related to this like feminist position, I guess, in the sense of like really wanting to make explicit all the voices that go into the work that are in a production that are often masked, that you don't like hear so much about. So when I think about expanded cinema, I think a lot about it in those terms, not just like a holographic screen or watching something in a specifically crafted sculpture, but in the sense of like really bringing out the sociality of the work and making it, foregrounding it, and making those voices really audible and really a part of the exhibition. So in Palermo, we invited, we'll have like Christabel and Riley, who's made the soundtrack with Seymour Wright, and we'll do a concert, and there'll be a puppet. Some more programs more directly related to the Castelbuono context and some of the local communities there. So there will be like a sort of, not a puppet, sorry, I'm going to say the word wrong, canto e kuntu. Esatto. A kuntu, esatto. A kind of retelling or reinterpretation of Alcestis on the site. And then another idea for the public program is for my children to do also an event for local children, so in Castelbuono, so something orientated around dying, because they like horror movies and going to the underground. So we tried to make this very expanded context again operate for this piece. Come to Palermo to see all the different things, to Castelbuono. You're all invited.
Thank you.
Thinking about this idea of creating networks through cinema, and I mean thinking about expanded cinema like this series of nets that you can create around it. I wanted to understand. I mean, you had like in the past you had this cine club in London, and now you are developing it in Palermo. How is affecting? I mean, the relocation again. How is affecting the sense of the club, and then the sense of your practice again, more in general?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. So it's not like a copy of the one in London. I mean, in some ways it is, in the sense of like when we left and when we moved to Italy, I was thinking, that's really one of the things I'm going to miss the most was this cine club and how much it had enriched my sort of daily and working life. And so when I arrived in Palermo, I met immediately 2 or 3 people, the other members of Novrofea, which is the collective that I've started since being there. There's Flora Pitrolo, who's like a DJ and a music theorist and a performance artist. There's Pietro Aroldi, who's an architect from Palermo, and there's Stella Sidelli, who's a curator. So we had actually Flora and Stella are Palermitani, but they had also been in London for 10 years, and we all arrived at the same point in Palermo. And when you arrive in Palermo, it's a place so full of potential that the immediate reaction is that to want to do things, to want to do a million things, and then the crushing realization that maybe isn't as possible as you thought. But Novrofea happened because I was one day walking past this porno cinema in Palermo called Orfeo, and it's a long story actually. Yeah,
very pertinent.
It's a really long story, but it was closed and it was for rent, and I had some discussions really surreal discussions with the owner about the fact that he should give me the cinema and I would make a program and then raise the value of his property, and he could then, that didn't end so well. But we took the name from the porno cinema and we tried to flip it, so with the idea of from films that were about like looking at women to films made by women and queer people and people of color. So like changing around the conceit a little bit. And, we don't exactly have any money, but there is the Institut Français and the Goethe Institute, and they are very helpful and active in Palermo in terms of supporting things. And so we have managed to do 3 or 4 events that have been really great, and the last one we did was like unbelievable success. We showed it was last Friday, and we showed some films, historical films from the 70s, Italian feminists, in fact from the Femminista Collettivo da Roma qua, and who made a film called La lotta non è finito, and which then subsequently disbanded, and one of the female directors in that group was called Annabella Misculio, and we showed 2 more of her films. And then we showed an extract from a film that is astonishing called Processo per stupro, which some of you may know. It's on Rai, it's on the website. There is an estratto of the lawyer. It's a film about a woman who is raped by 4 men. It's a documentation of the trial, and it's really incredible. And Rai did not give us the permission to screen the film in its entirety because it's a bit of a complicated story, but there is a law that is called il diritto di obbligo, and it's the right to...
Oblio.
Ho sbagliato, scusa. Shouldn't try to speak. But... the right to be forgotten. So one of the relatives of the perpetrators has exercised this right to be. So we couldn't show the film, so we tried instead to publicize the film by creating a program around it, and in a way the the absence of the film was like the sort of core of the program. But I'm digressing. But it was really an amazing moment because the cinema was full. Like we had to turn 50% of the audience away, and it doesn't happen so often in a Palermo context, I suppose. And there was really an amazing appetite to see this material in particular. And this great also thing of like of having this, all the young, very young 25-year-old feminist groups, plus all the older 75-year-old feminist groups who don't, by the way, talk to each other because of the complications that I'm sure you're aware of. And so it really brought together those groups in an amazing way. And then for me, that's like, I really, obviously, like the motivation for Nuova Orfei is like to try to give something back to a city that I've newly arrived in, but it's also like a very selfish and narcissistic, not narcissistic, I don't know, but it's a selfish motivation also, because I want to be with people watching films, and I want to be in community watching films, and this is like a way to affect that. So the motivation is like self-serving as well as serving the community, I suppose. I mean, yeah, it's the reality of it.
It's the best way to be part of a community.
Certo.
Certo. Otherwise, there will be more Lars von Trier situation if you only serve the community, and then you are forced to shoot everyone. I don't know. And you mentioned earlier about the involvement of also of a queer community. And I think it's part of your practice, even from before. It's really evident in your movies where queer characters, but queer people also appear, like Adam Christiansen, C.A. Conrad, and so on and so forth. But at the same time, motherhood is also a relevant theme in your movies, and these two are usually considered as opposite poles: the queer community from one side and the nuclear family it's on the other side. So how do you combine these two poles? Because in your movies it appears that there is a very natural connection in a sense.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, for me, I guess like third wave feminism. I don't know what wave we're in. Whatever wave.
Fifth.
Fifth wave feminism is queer feminism, is black feminism, is expansive feminism. So I don't see at all a contradiction in those two things being in the same frame. In fact, I think that they should be in dialogue with each other, and it's obvious to me, like, it's also in relation to the screening we had last week. It was so nice to see those opposing camps, because the older feminists and the younger feminists, because the younger feminists are upset with the older feminists for having this more exclusionary idea of feminism that is quite essentialist, I suppose. And there's like a sort of at the same time there is a kind of cancel culture issue with the younger generation. I don't know, the whole thing is complex in terms of like human beings and trying to get them to speak to one another. But I try always to do that with my own films, is to put these like difficult things together in one tender container, opposing things together in a container. So the fact that motherhood and the nuclear family might sit alongside something like more of a queer politics or ethics, to me is like necessary and difficult and necessary and complicated and messy, but in a good way. Like, we should all call each other in, not call each other out. I think.
Yeah, and also motherhood in itself as an history in feminism. I think about Adrian Rich.
Exactly. So
Nato di Donna. I don't know the title in English, but so at the beginning, motherhood was considered an ontological.
Yeah, and motherhood is exactly not about this insular nuclear family sort of navel-gazing idea, like how do I individually look after my child? It's more like motherhood as a paradigm for an ethical relationship to otherness. You know, how do we behave in relation to the other in my stomach and the other in the world in general? So really trying to take this like crazy experience of having to care for another and taking that outside of the confines of like a neoliberal, whatever, individualistic nuclear family context, and like throwing that out into the world. How do I care for myself, my child, the next door neighbor, the guy on the street, like for an ethical relationship out into the world and not like inside into the nuclear family.
This makes me think that, in a sense, all the work is about the expansion of cinema, of family. I mean, it's also a concept of family that is expanded. So we are talking about this kind of relocation and expansion through a communal practice, let's say, that from the self, expanded, even the self itself is expanded through this communal practice. And talking about expansions, I want to ask you just like my last question, let's say, what's gonna next? What's in your next film? Are you working on a new project or?
Yeah, I'm working on a feature film, which is exciting. I've always avoided it. I never wanted to make a feature because I didn't understand why you would need to. Or I felt content with a short form, or I didn't make a distinction between longer and shorter, let's say. In my head, my films are always 9-hour Gestaltungsworks, and then they end up being 20-minute edits. So, but I've kind of crossed over into something when I have now a desire to. I want to be on set for longer. It's more like a practical thing. I don't really care about the duration of the film. I want to craft something that takes longer and has more in it, I guess. So I'm making a feature with the BBC, which is strange, I suppose, because it's very commercial context, but it will not be a commercial film. These things are like there happens to be at the moment somebody who is the director of BBC Films, the development department, who is like interested in supporting more experimental production. So it will still be experimental cinema, formally speaking. But yeah, it's the story again of a woman, a kind of epic story. Alice Notley is sort of behind it because she seems to be behind everything for me, and it's also a Kathy Acker novel. There are fragments of a Kathy Acker novel on Don Quixote that are in it, and it was basically the story of a woman who has an abortion and stumbles into the night looking for love. But it's not like a heterosexual love. She encounters an array of strangers over the night, from individuals to also animals, objects, and it takes place during the course of one night. And it will be very similar to my other productions in terms of its logic. It features again, Adam Christensen, many of my friends and colleagues and people that I am using the movie as an excuse to get to know. Alice Notley will be in it again. It features from Dussel, the central protagonist, who tells the story about the dream about the egg. And really, crucially also, it's collectively written. We have developed it like over 2 years over Zoom, and everybody in it will be credited and paid as a writer, which was like really a fundamental conceit also, because it doesn't really happen so much in an industry context. But, you know, I think if you think of people historically like Mike Leigh, who've spent 2 years improvising with a troupe of actors who've kind of constructed the character collaboratively, but somehow the convention has dictated that Mike Leigh is credited for the film. So I wanted to like really to undo that and to think really concretely and very practically and in production terms about the power relations, within that context. So it's collectively written and everybody's paid properly as a writer. I'm proud of that.
So I assume institutions are ready to work with you in this, in diffusing new practices, new more ethical practices. Was it difficult to work in museums or with the BBC? Do you need to discuss your practice, or they are ready?
I think there's been a change in the last 5 years in the art world, certainly in the UK. I don't know if it's also happening here. I think maybe...
Not sure.
Maybe it's starting. I don't know. And there were like, so, for example, with the public program that we have put together here for in Palermo, it's everybody will be paid, for sure. I mean, and but then also in the context of the BBC, they're open to these conversations for sure. And one of the first meetings we had also was about like, what is the structure of a production? What does it mean for me to make a feature? Like, I cannot leave my children for 6 weeks and go and shoot, which is the normal duration of a feature shoot. And I want the production itself, the production logic, to echo the thematic and the politics of the film and of the content. So I said to them at the very beginning, like, we need to find a structure that can accommodate people who are carers, or people who have children, or people who have not enough money to commit to this thing, or who have other jobs. And so we have designed like an episodic structure where we shoot for 2 weeks, then we take 2 months break, then we shoot again for 2 weeks. And in a way, it's very luxurious. I mean, for me, the best way to work is slowly, because the films I make are such a combination. I mean, I don't even really like the distinction, but like, between documentary and fiction, that they include real things, and when they are made slowly, they have the opportunity to respond in a way that like a mainstream industry model doesn't allow for. So that's also really a privilege, I think, to be able to have that, to work in that way. But they seem to be fine with it, so...
Thank you so much for this glimpse of hope. And I think it's time to open our conversation to the people in the audience. If someone wants to make a question or a note, a remark, or anything. Come on, don't be shy.
It's okay.
It's always embarrassing.
You can ask me at the pub, the bar, if you want. Mm. Mm-hmm. So, well, the serpent is traditionally a symbol of femininity. Female deities always had serpents. They were like a potent, a symbol of like feminine potency. But the more banal answer, or domestic answer, which is maybe more, which deserves attention too, is my son really wanted a pet snake, and so kind of came also out of deciding to have to give him a go with an experience with a snake. So we it was quite amazing actually, because when the snake came on set, the way that actually both of the kids, you can see it in the shot, respond to the snake, it was like totally tender. And really, like they really, it was like they were stroking the softest cat, or something furry, and like, but it was like this really cold, muscular, like serpente. And so it got more airspace than we might have given it in the edit, because it was like actually this oddly tender moment between the child and an animal that isn't like perceived often as a cuddly one. Do you have anything to add about the snake, Nick?
another question?
I just say thank you because
Okay, fantastic.
Finished. It's the end. Basta.
Thank you so much for stopping
So like
us.
this, yeah, exactly.